Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Vineyard Voice, a WCF podcast. I'm Bethany, and we're here with brother Michael and sister Lilandi. If I can confirm I said that correct.
Yeah,
perfect. It's great to have you guys on board. It's fantastic that you've come on board to do this podcast with us for our very first episode, and I'm really looking forward to our chat. I thought we'd start off the podcast with just talking about you guys and the story of you, who you are, where you're from, your journey to and in the truth.
Well, I'll let ladies go first.
All right. So, we're obviously a couple in South Africa, and we've got 2 children. I grew up as a Christadelphian. I think, speaking under correction, I'm probably about a 5th generation Christadelphian on my mother's side. And so that's kind of really what I've always known. Michael's got a bit of a different story there.
Yeah, so I originally grew up in a Dutch Reformed church, and then when I met Lilandi, she kind of challenged my belief values, and she brought me into the truth about 13 years ago. 14 years ago, actually. And so I'm a first-generational Christadelphian, and I've just been living in this wonderful life with my wife and growing spiritually since then.
Wow, that's amazing. And you've come on to do mission work, which is so incredible. So you guys are obviously in South Africa running some preaching efforts and mission work. What kind of projects are you currently involved in out there?
There's quite a few. We actually made a list. So we're really collaborating really closely with a non-profit organization called the Cuddle Trust. And basically the Cuddle Trust is the outreach arm of our original ecclesia. And the Cuddle Trust is very focused on working within the early childhood development sector. And our motto is helping others help themselves. So we do a lot of training, training teachers how to work in preschools, but we also work then with sort of the day-to-day needs of things like food parcels, and just general resources that they need and so on. Michael and I really are quite involved then with young people. So would you like to tell them about the Bible clubs?
Yeah, so we actually... Originally, on our second, what we call it, stint of outreach work, we were originally sponsored in 2011, where we then started doing our mission work. And then we created a couple of programs there. And since we've moved to Cape Town 7 years ago, we kind of decided to duplicate those programs here when we started doing a second stint of outreach work. So one of our main projects that we do is what we call a Bible club. And this is basically like a Sunday school on a Saturday for children that go to their normal denomination churches. But these are children that basically then grow up in lower income areas, and their churches it's not necessarily catered for children. So we've been actively now busy in 2 areas. One is called Wolverrivier, or Wolf River, directly translated into English, where we've got a register of about 70 children coming on various times to Bible Club. Yeah. So we've got a container there that the WCF has sponsored us that can host about 30, maximum about 50 children that we've squeezed in there. But then we have to work inside and outside of the container. But on a regular basis, we have about 35 children per Saturday attending Bible Club. And it is such a wonderful and energetic vibe with the children there. And then we've got another area, which is about an hour north from where we are. That's called Green Village. Now, this used to be a mining area where the mine unfortunately had to stop mining due to fossils being discovered. So it's a very poverty area now because the people don't have a source of income anymore. And there we have about also 60 children on roster coming to Bible Club there. But because it's an hour north from us, we don't go there every week. We're there about twice a week.
Twice a month.
Yeah, twice a month that we go and spend time with the children there. And then that Bible Club is different from the one that we have at Wolverine, because that one we do in Afrikaans exclusively.
Wow,
So
okay.
Afrikaans being one of the 11 official languages in South Africa. Yeah.
It is a Saturday today, so you've been to Bible Club before this, is that right?
Today was actually a different day. As you can see, I'm donning a blue T-shirt. Unfortunately, not everyone will be able to see that. But we did a different project, which is direct preaching, which we call Clean Up for Christ, which is a project that Lilandi and I started here in Blouberg. Walking on the beaches here, we just realized there's a lot of rubbish there. And we started then to pick it up as just a family thing. And then we decided, why not get the whole ecclesia involved? And since then, we've been doing this once a month on the last Saturday of every month. We gather then all the people that is available, and we go out then and do a beach cleanup, donning T-shirts that says Clean Up for Christ, but then also has Hebrews 10 verse 24 written on the back of the T-shirt to just kind of draw people's attention to what we are doing. So that is another direct preaching initiative that we are doing.
What's really exciting about the Clean Up for Christ is that it's kind of gone worldwide, because we started with some of the P2P groups that came through, and they've taken it and they've started it back in like the States.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so we've also done it across South Africa. And it's such a non-confrontational way of preaching, because you're helping and you're just serving, and people notice, because you're all wearing the same T-shirts. They want to know, like, why are you doing this? I mean, it's kind of weird, just even in South Africa, because we need to create so many jobs, you do find people who get paid to pick up trash. And so when they see someone who's doing it freely, it definitely draws attention. And so we've had some really interesting conversations coming through, just from basically going onto the beach and cleaning up.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. I was at a conference earlier in the year and we all had T-shirts such and such, and going out into the town and stuff. People notice your T-shirts and they ask you questions. Oh, what are you from? What is that T-shirt about? Yeah. So I definitely think that's a great form of preaching. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what first drew you to live this kind of lifestyle? Because you guys are full-time field workers, is that right?
That is correct, yes. So I'm full-time sponsored by the WCF. And then Lilandi has got a part-time job that she has to do. Along with educating our children at home, she's got actually a full-time involvement with the children and her work. But then in her free time, she is then also dedicating her time to mission work and to outreaching projects that we have.
So I think to answer the original question, which is what first drew us, for myself, I grew up in a family that was very involved in preaching. My parents, we used to go into the neighboring countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, go do preaching trips there. And I grew up spending many an evening in a library because there was public lectures being hosted. But it was interesting because I actually, as a teenager, I was like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, this doesn't, this is not speaking to me. And then when we in South Africa decided we want to follow the touch to teach approach, where you actually just go out and serve and you meet people in their communities. And we started doing that and seeing, like, I know there was one little boy especially, who I could see the growth from where we thought he was severely brain damaged, delayed, just our constant interaction, and the way that we were working in that community. He changed, like he was able to start walking by himself. He wanted to start speaking. So I think that was really a turning point for me, is where I could see that we can actually just show God's love and we can see the difference that makes. And that's what then really, that was more or less the same time that we were just before we got married. And so that's kind of, we were doing it anyway. And then we decided we'd like to do that more full time, just because the need was so great, especially in the area that we were living.
Yeah, Lilandi kind of led me into this life as well. I can remember asking her on a date once, and she said, "Well, I'm actually busy today, but if you'd like to come along, then we can make a date out of it." And we took a bunch of children to a privately owned zoo as an outing, and that was our date, to go and do outreach work with a bunch of children. So yeah, that's how I basically got introduced to outreach work.
I think that's when you know what first draws you to mission work, is when you're doing mission work on your dates. That's amazing, that is. There was like a bit of a segment that I wanted to introduce to the podcast, which I think you've already touched on, which is inspiring stories. So if you have sort of the most inspiring thing you've witnessed during your efforts.
Once again, ladies first.
Something that actually happened quite recently that I think really just re-energized us and encouraged us is, so where we have that shipping container that's been converted into a classroom, the Wolverfield community, they are extremely poor, and the culture of that group is very aggressive. They have zero respect for women. And it's basically a dog eat dog. Like you fight for your rights. That's normal. And so when we started our Bible club there 2 years ago, it was really crazy. Like you would put pencils down on the table and they would start like diving over each other and fighting with each other to have the pencils. If you were giving out the apples, anything you did, you had to first sort of like, there was just this literal, like, I don't know.
Being a referee almost.
Yeah, it was really scary actually. And so we've been working with these children for 2 years now, and the person whose property, she said we can put the container on her property. She also works in the community a lot. And this week, actually, we were chatting to her, and she said when she goes into that community now, she can tell which children come to Bible club and which don't, in the way that they behave, that they are respectful, that they look after her, that they just, so that for us, I think, was really incredible to know that we had made that change. We could see the change at Bible club itself, like they weren't fighting with each other as much. They have a lot more respect for me. But we didn't realize that it had actually translated into their everyday lives, which is absolutely fantastic. So that's something for me was really amazing. What would you like to share?
So something that is more of a recent event, but it actually started 11 years ago, was when we started in Kempton Park, Johannesburg, our little Bible club and what we called homework club back then. We had this young lady join us with the name of Tina, and we basically helped her with her homework and saw her grow up to be a wonderful little lady. And then just last year when we were visiting Kempton Park, it just coincidentally happened that she was then asking to be baptized as well. So, it was a very heartwarming experience to see how the fruit that the seeds that we've planted, how it became a fruit, and that I was then there to baptize her with our visit in Johannesburg. And also other children that later joined, and over the last several years then also came to baptism. And we have a young gentleman, William, who is now a student studying to become a doctor. And he was but a boy of 8 years old when we met him. And basically he told us on an occasion, it's because of all the help that we gave him with his homework and allowing him internet access, and through the help that we gave through the ecclesia, that he was then now able to graduate and become accepted in university with honors to become to study in medical. And also how his relationship has also matured into the international ecclesias. We have brothers and sisters abroad that's actually now sponsoring some of his needs, because his mom and dad, unfortunately, is on the lower income side. So they are financially supporting him to make sure that he has got everything that he needs to complete in his studies. So it's that is very inspiring to see how, what we thought was just a way to get children to come to church became and blossomed into something beautiful.
Wow. Yeah, those are both very powerful stories. And it's not just a once-off thing. It is the result of such consistent effort over such a long period of time to see those results. That is very powerful. I love hearing stories like that. I do love it. The other thing I sort of wanted to bring out, which is for people who might be listening to this podcast, interested in working in the Lord's Vineyard, doing what you do, is something that might be a barrier to them is going to another country and what it's going to be like there and how it's going to change and how it's going to be different from where you're from. So in your experiences, obviously you've been South Africa and in countries around in Africa. What is a cultural difference that you saw that you weren't expecting?
So in South Africa, we actually have 11 official languages. And English is just one of them, and Afrikaans is just one of them. And then we have 9 others that we have to kind of break barriers with. And we found that, there is a language barrier, and we kind of had that iterated again this year with the P2P group that came to visit us, where these children don't necessarily speak English. They speak Xhosa or Zulu or Afrikaans in their homes, and then they need a translator. And it's something that we found, God always provides a translator. It doesn't matter where you are going. If you start doing the work, then you'll find somebody that can actually translate English into Xhosa or Tswana or Zulu or Ntibedi, or from Afrikaans to English, as I had to be the translator once. So it is a challenge, when we go into different places, because in Africa, the languages change again. The moment that we cross into Mozambique, then we have to start speaking Portuguese. And when we go into Botswana, Tswana is the main language there. But God always kind of provides a translator in those times that we need it.
And I think something else as well with the language barrier is that because we're not just preaching through lessons and through lectures, you could literally just pick up a soccer ball and you have that connection. I mean, sport is very much a connection. Music is a connection. Dancing is a connection. So you kind of just need to find, what is the connection for these children. And they're so open and just they soak in any attention and love that they get, but then they also just give back so much, So I wouldn't say you don't let that put you off. Rather come, especially if you're coming somewhere, what we found with the P2P groups that come here, it's really helpful to have someone who's already there, who is a local. Even for us, we've had quite a culture shock just coming from Johannesburg to Cape Town and working, as I said, with the coloured community. So maybe just as a caveat, they call themselves the Coloureds. I know in some places that seems like a racial slur, but that's their culture. We thought it would be very similar to the work we'd been doing with the predominantly Zulu culture in Johannesburg, and it is completely different. So even for us, it's been quite a learning curve to figure out how to connect to them and just how their society works, and like I said, also helping them to understand that even though in their society the men are very predominant and the women really aren't respected, in a Christ society, that's not the case. And this is the way that we actually want to live. So it's definitely something that you have to be aware of. But I think that, as Michael said, God is going to provide the solution as well.
Yeah. Something that, people also kind of take for granted, and sometimes we are guilty of that as well, is coming into a different country, be it now South Africa or Cambodia or India, is there's a big socioeconomic difference between what people are used to and what is actually on the ground. And here in South Africa, you can change between first world and third world in a matter of a mile or 2 miles radius. And it is kind of something, empathy and a skill that you have to learn, that you kind of have to put yourself in these people's perspectives and shoes and understand that if you hand out food and they get aggressive, that might be the only meal that they've had this whole week. So they're not trying to be greedy. They just actually
Desperate.
famished and desperate. So it's just something that people sometimes just need to take in, keep in the back of their minds when coming into different countries. That that socioeconomic difference is not always clear to everyone. I'm lacking not a proper English word for that. But other times it is very clear that these people are suffering, especially when you walk and you see that they're wearing two different size flip-flops, and one is pink and a size 3 and the other one is purple and size 20. Then you kind of know that there's a huge need for clothing or food in their area. So yeah, those are the cultural differences and challenges that we face on a nearly daily basis.
And so much of what you said there, including the language barrier and having different perspectives, is when you go to another country, you don't necessarily need to know all those things. You can be manifesting Christ in your clean up for Christ. People see that in your, as you say, so many different ways, rather than sitting down and having a lecture or talking. There's so many different ways that you can outreach to people, and they can see you and be like, wow, yeah, that is manifesting Christ, and they are working in the Lord's vineyard. And God will provide. Like, I 100% am a believer in that, of course. It's amazing. So obviously you have children. How do you think your sort of lifestyle as full-time field workers, how do they come into that lifestyle?
Our children at a very young age got involved with what we did, and having them as toddlers doing outreach work with us was very easy, because they just kind of go along and do what mom and dad does. But now that we are facing the preteen age of children, it's not as easy as it used to be. Sometimes we have to face an eye roll or a rolled out lip with them. But what is
they're actually really good. But the challenge is that they are now the same age as the children with whom we are working in these projects. And so it's really difficult for them to define their role within what we're doing. So for example, with the Bible clubs, when we started, it's easy to rely on them. Like, can you go fetch me a pair of scissors? Can you hand out these papers? So you almost start giving them this role of leadership, but they're younger than some of the children there. And so the children don't respect them as leaders, rightfully so. And then your own children, they don't know these children. They're vastly different cultures, different life experiences. So it's a lot, to put a 10, 11-year-old into that space. What we have found, though, is over these, 2 years that we've specifically been working with that age group, is our own children's perspective has broadened. They obviously get to see that there's more to life than what I experience in my little bubble. And they've really done so well. What really stood out for us is when we took the children away on a mini youth camp. We took our girls along with us. They were the only white children there, and yet they just completely blended in. They joined in with everything. They didn't see themselves as better than anyone else. They just they made great friends. So that was really, incredible. And I think I'm really proud of them, for doing that. But it does come with some challenges. It comes with a lot of conversations. Because they're obviously also questioning, why is it like this? Why can't the government just fix that? Why can't this just be better? But I think those conversations are necessary, and I'm glad that we have opportunities to have those conversations.
But it is quite nice to see, because of that perspective that Lilandi mentioned, that we can take them and they can make friends with a child that lives in first world suburbs, or they can play with those children kicking a soccer ball in what they call a soccer field, but it's just an open piece of grass, and have the same amount of fun with both of the groups of children that they meet with. And also to have the respect, as Lilandi said, for both of those income groups, not to treat those who are in a higher income group more important than they are, but then also not treating those who are in the lower income groups as lesser than they are. So yeah, sometimes, like I say, we have a little bit of a reluctancy when it comes to going to a project, but once they're there, they're 100% involved, and they just shine the image of Christ every time that we go out.
That's inspiring to see.
It's how we're really proud.
Yeah.
No bias.
No bias.
But I mean, they've literally been coming with us. I've got pictures of taking Zante. She's in a baby carrier on my chest, and we were doing like a thing where we would take our pets into the settlements and we would teach the children about different animals and things. So that's really kind of what they've grown up with.
She was 2 weeks old when she went to her first Bible club.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, when you're immersed in the lifestyle, that's all you see, and that's what people find when they do go do mission work, is they're so immersed in the Word of God, and that can only just have a positive effect on you, can't it? That's what I found anyway.
Yeah.
So I think
something maybe to add,
no, go for it,
is that I think one of the amazing things about working with the projects that the Cuddle Trust is involved in is that we are very family oriented, trust. And so we encourage, bringing children along. We encourage teenagers to get involved, and we adapt our projects so that we can find a role, for every person coming. When we pack food parcels, I know like my sister, she's got a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they're just as involved in packing the food parcels as what, our two are, at, 12 and 11. So we just find a way to make sure everyone's involved, and age is definitely not a barrier.
Yeah, definitely. Inclusivity. I love it. So we've talked a lot about the different projects and mission work that you're involved in South Africa, and it does all sound incredible, like you're doing an incredible work over there, really inspiring to our listeners, inspiring to me listening to all your stories. So what is a preaching lesson or takeaway that you would give to people listening to this podcast?
Obviously, everything that we do, we draw from Scripture. We look at various different characters in the Scripture, and we have to take into account, that sometimes you're going to be an Abraham, where you leave your comforts of your home to go into a foreign country and live as a foreigner among the people. And you have to trust in God when you're there, that everything is going to go according to His will. And sometimes, you are Paul, that you think everything is going to go according to a certain way, but then you have resistance, and you have people that's not welcoming towards you, and you kind of have to then take those punches and not be discouraged by them, but just keep on looking for God's way and waiting for God to open up a specific door for you. So we live a lot with the idea, as James, in the book of James, chapter 1, verse 27, where we are instructed to look after the widows and the fatherless. And one of the ways that we found it is that, preaching can be anything. You don't have to come there with a whole bookcase full of scriptural materials. Sometimes you have a box of pencils and a coloring book, and it is to give attention to the children, or sometimes it is to dig a garden for someone or kick a soccer ball around on a field. So what we would encourage is to, even if it's preaching in your own area, use what you have. Do not let preaching be excused that, I'm not sponsored, or I'm not fluent in language, or I'm not creative. Take what you can do. If you're great at sports, go and play a ball game with children, or go to the elderly and go and massage them if you are able and skilled in that sense. But use what you have and just go and do what Jesus did, and that is to touch the people, not necessarily to teach, but to heal them and to listen to them and just to be a servant to them.
And I think something to add to that, Michael and I very much like Matthew chapter 6, but especially, the verse where it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And we see that in so many ways, but maybe one example is that coming toward the beginning of the new school year in South Africa. Our school year works January to December. So we're heading toward a new school year, and what we need to be providing for all of the children in our various projects across the country is stationery, because the schools don't provide any stationery and they don't have the resources, the money to afford stationery. And that can be quite expensive. And so we were looking for, places that we could maybe get like a discount rate if we buy bulk or something like that. So we went to one of these stationery stores here in Cape Town. We went to their showroom, and there's no such thing as coincidence. While we are there with my sister-in-law, who comes from Scotland, and her little 1-year-old who's walking around wanting to touch everything, and we're a little bit wary. But while we're there, in walks the owner of this stationery store, and he happens to be Irish. And so he hears my sister-in-law's accent, and he gets so excited about this little boy running around, and he wishes he had grandchildren. And one thing led to another. He hears about what we're doing, and he pretty much said to us, you know what, if you send me an email with what you're needing, I'll give it to you for free.
Wow.
And if I can't give it to you for free, I'll give it to you at like the lowest discounted price that he possibly could. And we just left that shop absolutely praising God, because that's how he works, right? And now we have this, we're literally going to do the stationery order this afternoon, that we can now provide for these children. And that happens so often. We really should start writing it down somewhere, but it really does. Once you just get going, God does open these doors and he does provide. And it's really fantastic to see and to be involved in.
That is so incredible, just to see the proof of that in front of your eyes. Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I do. So if people wanted to find out more about what you're doing in South Africa, where could they find information for that?
So we are both on Facebook and on Instagram. For our direct preaching activities, you can find us at Ignite and Shine on both Facebook and on Instagram.
And then to see more of sort of the outreach side of what we do, again, on Facebook and Instagram, you can look for Cuddle Trust. And you'll find lots of pictures and little video clips of the projects we've been talking about and more.
Thanks so much for coming on board and chatting with me. It's been super interesting getting to know you guys and a bit about the projects you're doing in South Africa. So I guess that probably brings us to the end of the episode. So God bless everyone's working in the Lord's Vineyard, and God bless you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sister Bethany.